Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business Growth Accelerator. Your Chief Business Strategist here, Brandon, with a very special guest. I have Mr. Scott Springer here. Scott, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Brandon. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So we're just going to get things rolling here, not waste any time. Scott, let me know a little bit more about you and the business that you have for our audience.
Okay, so Scott Springer. I'm president of Shovel Consulting Group. I started the company about 3.5 years ago now. I was shortly after COVID when I started it. Prior to that, I was in manufacturing for over 25 years. Worked for a lot of different companies, from big companies to small companies, accelerating, small companies to scale up in size and meet demand. I was always like the turnaround guy. I was always brought into places to help turn it around, to get manufacturing plants running well, to get organizations running smoothly and stuff. And after my last big, full-time job, I started my own consulting company. And so now I help small to mid-sized companies scale, grow. I help engineer their plants, help with applying lean manufacturing principles, help with their supply chain, stuff like that.
Nice. Yeah, I'm very familiar with lean. Spent a couple of years at a manufacturing plant in pharmaceuticals, and they implemented a lean program there. And I just became fascinated with it ever since, just because one of the cost savings that is initiated with it, and two, the speed of production that you can get with it once everything is running smooth. So maybe we can go into a little bit more details of that when it comes to lean. For just your everyday small business. I mean, it doesn't really matter the niche with it. So how can let's say roofing company or a plumbing company, implement lean into their operations?
Well, I think it's with any company. A lot of times I was brought in to turn places around, and you always you're beginning with the end in mind. Having habits I highly, always begin with the end in mind. What do you want to be when you grow up? You might be a $10 million company, and when you're 20 million, and then 40 million, and then 80 million, and 160 million, right? You try to design the processes, right, with the best use of peopleware, software, and hardware in order to maximize your output, and try to design it so that you can scale effectively. Too often, like a lot of times I get brought into companies and they've already scaled in sales, but they haven't scaled in the manufacturing and operations side because they didn't take into account lean principles when they were designing their initial processes, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever those processes is, it could be a shipping process, manufacturing, scheduling, whatever. It doesn't matter what the process is. It's across almost all manufacturing industries. It's all the same. It's all the same processes. It's just maybe the technology of the actual manufacturing is slightly different, but it's, everything's the same. So with that, you design it for that growth so that when you scale, it's easy. You're just making more widgets. It's not like you got to add a whole lot more people. Mm-hmm. Too many people, they have a very manual, non-lean process. So when you go from 10 million to 20 million, they're doubling their staff, doubling the number of people to make that happen. You shouldn't be doubling. There should be a growth factor in there. This economies of scale for when you apply the right principles on the shop floor, in the office, so that you can take orders easier, you can process orders easier, you can manufacture stuff easier and scale easily. You can go from 10 million to 100 million with the same processes without having to reinvent the wheel. Too often people, they band-aid stuff until everything breaks, until the dam breaks. When you could design a process for a $1 million company that'll work when they're $100 million and doesn't change. But most people don't think like that. They just want to just fix it, just band-aid it, just, get it done as fast as they can. And that's it. They're not thinking about the long-term impact.
For sure. Yeah, definitely great advice there when it comes to growing and scaling. Backing up a little bit, you mentioned that you did have the traditional 9 to 5 and then COVID happened and you decided to kind of hang your own shingle.
At 9 to 5.
What's that?
We never had 9 in manufacturing.
I totally understand that. Manufacturing is 24/7 if a plant to run right, 3 shifts or 2 shifts or I did the whole 12 hours, 7 to 7. It was brutal. Totally get it. But, COVID happened. You decided to pivot there, hang your own shingle. What was that like getting started?
So the last company I worked for, that was kind of like my stepping stone into consulting. I worked for a company called Vital Proteins, and I was brought in because they were scaling fast. And I didn't know if I want to go work for such a small company at the time. Let's say they were only at 35 million in revenue. I always worked at big companies or bigger companies. I worked at Coca-Cola and a Bunge and a company called Omega Protein, and I always had like multiple plants under me. And so I'm interviewing at, Vital Proteins. The owner's like, yeah, we're going to double every single year and we're going to sell to a big CPG company. And I'm like, double every year. Yeah. How many times have I heard that from sales? Right. Didn't believe it at all. First year, I'm like, whoa, we are doubling every year. And one of the reasons I took the job wasn't this, I didn't think we would actually double every year, when I took the job, but they were building a brand new plant from scratch, complete greenfield. I've always inherited bad manufacturing plants and had to revamp them to make them lean. But in this case, I was actually getting a clean slate, like literally just 4 walls in a brand new construction building, and I could design the whole plant. I did that. We doubled every single year. We went from like roughly, 35 to 70 to 140 to 250 to 500 million in 5 years. Okay. We sold to Nestle. Nestle, they're solely owned by Nestle now. Worked there for a year with Nestle. And then I decided, I want to do my own thing, because from people have different personalities on what they like. I like the fast-paced entrepreneur, fast-paced growth, make things happen real fast. Nestle's a great company, but it's a big company. It's like working for the government in some ways. I worked for Coca-Cola. It was the same way. It was very slow and methodical, which they have to be because there's the size and legal issues. But I like the fast-paced, quick growth. And so I started my own consulting company that helps other companies scale and grow like we did there, literally 100% a year for 5 years. Excuse me. But when I started, I was in the industry for a long time. So I had a lot of contacts. A lot of people knew me. They knew what I did at Vital and at places prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as I started my own consulting company, I was getting calls, hey, you got to talk to my friend here. You got to, it was all referrals at the beginning. People who had friends who were struggling with their plants, people who had brands who they didn't know how to do manufacturing, but they wanted to do their own manufacturing, building new plants, or they're having trouble with their supply chain. And so I was coming in and helping different companies do that almost immediately, like within the first month of starting my consulting company.
Nice. Yeah. Having that referral network is definitely a huge leverage to getting started in anything. So I've always preached that your network is your net worth, and having that is key. So after, your dream 100, I guess is the best way to put it, it's been exhausted and you've kind of ran through all of your hottest leads. What was the key tactic or strategy that you went out to the market with?
Well, I picked different focus areas that I can do. You're talking about kind of like to differentiate myself. So engineering and designing plants, helping out with leadership and supply chain and fix that. A lot of people don't do supply chain very well, at least in the US. A lot of the big companies do. I started out with big companies, so I learned how to do supply chain, how to do purchasing, negotiating contracts. I learned that early on in my career. And a lot of people, they've never done that, or they think they know how to do it, but they don't realize how much they're leaving on the table. So I help out companies there, developing people who have not worked with large companies, developing the large processes, and then training and development and purchasing. And so I picked different areas, and then I try to target those people, like let's say the purchasing people, the CFOs, and then I, reach out to them, different networking events I go to, but a lot of it's referrals, offering, partnering with people to refer each other back and forth. That's usually how I grow my business.
Okay. So none of the traditional marketing tactics of direct mail or ads or
email.
Okay.
Marketing. No, and obviously website SEO. But yeah, email marketing. I don't need to do direct mail or anything like that. Because that direct mailing large manufacturing companies, I always think about when I was running plants over the years. I never went through that stuff. I had a receptionist and they would just throw it out for me. I didn't want to see that stuff most of the time, unless I was, and that was just me,
Gotcha. Well, there's always the tactics to get past the receptionist.
Yeah,
It's got to be the right envelope. Let's
yeah,
put it
right.
that way. Yes, it still works. That's very interesting there on how you're getting your leads for your business. But when you're actually working in the plant itself and helping them grow, what kind of bottlenecks do you see outside of just the internal systems and processes that prevent a manufacturing plant from growing?
It's one of three things always. It's either people, processes, or equipment, right? And it's usually one of those three. I try to focus on the processes as much as I can. I help them select equipment and, optimize their equipment either with maintenance programs or proper training of the people on how to run the equipment. Too often I see people buy equipment and they think it's like buying something at a Walmart, buying a blender at a Walmart, take it to your kitchen, just plug it in and turn it on and it works, and you only have to read like a 7-step instruction. And people buy $300,000 pieces of equipment and they think they just plug it into the wall and hire a temp and they can run this $300,000 piece of equipment. It doesn't work like that. It takes a long time to get people up to speed and they got to understand they're complex pieces of equipment when you have automated equipment. So I help train them on actually how the equipment works, what's happening within the equipment, not just press start, and press stop if there's a problem. Because unfortunately, that's what I see in a lot of manufacturing plants. That's about the training they get as operators, which is not a good thing. You don't see that overseas. Overseas, it's much better training on the equipment of the operators, whether it's in Europe, South America, or Japan. They seem to do a better job than your typical U.S. manufacturing company. Not all of them, some of them are fantastic. Sometimes it's a little disappointing when you see the way we automate in the U.S.
Yeah, not much automation where I'm at currently. They're working on some processes, but we'll see how they shake out in the future. But I can definitely say, people are a very key component in growing. The wrong person in the wrong spot can
Yep.
really bottleneck, complete operations and bring everything to a halt and even decrease morale. And it's a shame because there's a lot of good companies out there that do great work. With the wrong people in place, it can be hell. So do you see anything else regarding pipeline processes or anything like that to help these manufacturing?
We'll just touch base on people real quick. So from my experience, like most people are fine. Some people get promoted into a role that they shouldn't have been promoted into, or usually it's a training process. Like people weren't trained for the role. In other words, they promote someone into a supervisor role with no supervisor training. They move somebody to run a piece of equipment with no training on the equipment or minimal training. So it's usually not the person's fault. It's the training and development of that person that's the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I started out, I was in the Navy. I went to the Naval Academy. I was in the Navy. And you think about it, the Navy, the military does a phenomenal job of training and developing people. You think about it. You take 18-year-old kids out of high school and 2 years later, they are running nuclear power plants on submarines and aircraft carriers. 2 years, a nuclear power plant with no issues in, 50 years since we've been doing it on the nuclear power plants, right? We've had other issues in the military, but it's all in the training and development, so you can train and develop almost anybody to do a lot of roles. Some people have ceilings, obviously, on different factors, but you can always train and develop people. And that's why I think we fall short in a lot of areas is we don't put enough emphasis on developing our people. When I ran plants, I always tried to, as much as I could, promote from within. But I didn't just promote them blindly. I would tell people, I'm like, I'm not going to promote you unless I'm 90% confident you're going to be successful after you get promoted. I'm like, you might be 60% right here. Here's what you're missing. You need to learn how to do this, X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. And you need to go take this training course. And next few months they would do it. I would promote them, right?
Yeah.
Succeed most of the time, 90%, and it also gets into the hiring practices, making sure you hire the right people, retention. If you have high turnover, you're never going to succeed. you're going to fail. It's no successful company has ever had high turnover that I'm aware of, you know.
Yeah, I mean, when you get people in, you teach them what they need to learn. They stay a couple of years and then leave. It takes that knowledge with them. Then you got to do that whole process over and over.
That's expensive. I'm reading a friend of mine introduced me to a book, and I don't know the author. It's called the No Asshole Rule. And when it's pretty funny concept is you got people who run people out of the company. So then you got to like rehire people, you got to retrain people. And so the people that ran these people out of a company, let's say, okay, Brandon Garcia ran out these 10 people this year and it cost the company X amount. They took that amount out of your annual bonus.
Rough.
And stuff. It just cracked me up, So I'm reading that book right now. It's really funny.
Very nice. We'll definitely leave that linked in the description there for you to check it out. Very nice. Very nice. Being in the internal processing like that, do you ever touch base on, any lead generation or marketing strategies to help these companies scale and grow, or is it all just kind of operations and people?
Mostly I do operations, supply chain, manufacturing. Okay. On some of them, I help them out a little bit with marketing and lead generation, but I kind of point them in the right direction because that's not my forte. I mean, I'm okay at it. I'm not an subject matter expert. Manufacturing, supply chain, got that covered. I can help you out a little bit, and then I pass it off to my friends, people I know, who are really good at that stuff, and pass it off to them and let them help them in those areas.
What do you see then, after you pass it off and kind of talk to your friends, the magic bullet for a manufacturing company to find the right clientele, so to speak?
I think it depends on the industry, right? Because every industry is different on how they get their clients. Whether it's a B2C business or whether it's a B2B business. B2B, things like LinkedIn and outreach and trade shows are actually very effective for B2B businesses. My clients who did those, they generated a lot of leads. They partner with some marketing companies that do help them with their lead generation through, sponsored searches, like Google ads and Facebook ads, stuff like that. That works well. You see, that's a whole new beast, when you're doing consumers, because then you're getting into potential influencers. I looked at Vital Proteins. Vital Proteins, obviously, one of the biggest, fastest growing B2C business years ago. And our marketing company, they were just at a different level than I've ever experienced in my life. And I loved watching them work. I mean, they were like magicians, how quick they can generate stuff into people's social media and the number of influencers they had and how they managed all those people. We had hundreds and thousands of influencers, and it was like an orchestra, the way they did all that. At least to see from, my viewpoint at watching that growth and how they did all that. They were one of the first companies to really use influencers. This is going back, pre-COVID, years before COVID, when they really started doing it, and it just took off. And then everybody was trying to copy them the way they did it. Now it's kind of like, it's changed a lot because it's not as big now. It's like there's so many influencers, so much in social media. It's almost like white noise, a little different nowadays. But back then, it was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, affiliate marketing has picked up quite a bit since COVID, I think. I mean, everybody's online trying to promote and push a product. You're on all the apps and the reels, and, TikTok has their shop that they're pushing, and every other person is throwing an ad for AG1 in their podcast.
Up and not down, right?
What's that?
Well, TikTok, what was it, just down last week or week before?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a blackout. Something's going on behind the scenes. We'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
Hopefully the algorithm doesn't get messed up too much, but I did notice a change since they took it down and brought it back. So,
and there's companies that are very good at that targeted marketing on the different social media apps. And there's people who are just, you're throwing money at nothing. You get no results.
Yeah. But when it comes to the no results, it's always one of three things: your hook, your story, your offer. So you just got to test and switch those things around, and the results should come in.
A little bit of your targeting too, because if they're spending money on the hook with people, going to people that are not interested or they're not even a target audience, right? So if you're you in pharmaceutical, you said, right? And so if you got a pharmaceutical company, if they're sending ads to auto shop owners, what's the point? You're just wasting that money. Right.
Well, it depends on the drug and
Maybe.
what the effect of being an auto shop owner has on you for the exposure. But I dealt primarily in the hospital sides. If you ever got an IV anytime between the years of 2010 and 2009/8 and 2010, probably went through my hands. All right. So on the manufacturing side, you take care of the peoples and processes. You see the exponential growth. Once that growth is there, what is the key thing to keep it sustainable?
On the manufacturing and operation side, staying ahead of that curve. You gotta be lock in step. Sales and operations need to be lock in step. And every company, sales and operations, they kind of butt heads. You got to put that aside and focus on the success of the company. Put the egos aside. Okay, what are we doing over the next 6 months to a year? Right? Doesn't have to be precise. Just be close so that we can keep the train moving in the right direction. Use that analogy, keep the train moving. It's like so that we can keep laying track down, We might turn, we might divert, things will change, no problem. But at least let's get close. If we just wait for it to happen, it's too late. Because a lot of times it might take 6 months to a year for manufacturing to catch up if they're not if they're not being proactive. If you get 100% growth and you've outstripped the capacity of your plant, you go into co-manufacturers, and that's very costly to go to co-manufacturers. But if they're ready and you're always a step ahead of sales always has to be growing. And sales, one of the worst things a company could do is sell product and not be able to deliver. And that's manufacturing and operations job to deliver that, right? And, it happens all the time for various reasons, but that's a customer killer. People will quickly go to another brand. They'll quickly go to another store. They'll do whatever to get the product that they need. You were selling, IVs. If you guys ran out of IVs, you're going to get IVs from somewhere. It's just not going to be from you anymore, So manufacturing always has to be a step ahead without, breaking the bank either. So there's a balance of cost, control, capital equipment control, hiring people. We were always at Vital Proteins when we were growing, because that's the fastest company. I've had fast growth before, but that was 100% a year. Every year was fast. We were always hiring for 6 months out. And if we slowed down, then we would stop hiring, but we never slowed down. So we were always hiring, but we always had people in the position. I always had people in positions 1 to 2 months before they were really needed. So we constantly just filled that in. We were shuffling all the time, constantly playing with the chess pieces, constantly developing people, bring someone in as an operator, and then they're a lead, then they're a supervisor and, manager and so forth. We did that fast, but always staying ahead of sales is critical.
Scott, man, you've given us a lot of great points, especially when it comes to the manufacturing business and industry. And all of these great points can translate to pretty much any industry or business that you're in. It's people's processes, marketing, and sales. You get all those things to work together, you will have a company running like a well-oiled machine. So where can people learn more about you and your business and how you could potentially help them get 3 of those 4 things right?
Yeah, well, you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can go to my website, www.chelwoodgroup.com, CHELWOOD group.com, or you can email me at scott@chelwoodgroup.com.
Yep, I'll have all that information down there in the show notes below. Is there any kind of deals or specials that you're running right now when it comes to your consultations?
Nothing right now.
Okay.
Got a few programs to help different manufacturing companies, help them save money. Depending on the size of the company, it could be hundreds of thousands or millions a year pretty easily. There are different programs that can potentially be funded by the state and the federal government. Okay. On events, depending on the state and depending on what you need done. But, a lot of the cost savings could be funded through different manufacturing organizations in the government.